It wasn't the creaks in the floorboards or the draft that slipped beneath the doors that haunted people after the credits. It was the quiet, unnatural, deliberate, sentient. The Changeling didn't rely on sudden shocks or grotesque images to leave a scar. It whispered, it watched, and it waited. Released in 1980, at a time when horror cinema was shifting toward loud, blood-soaked terror and fast-moving monsters, this film took a path rarely traveled. It leaned into grief, into silence, into rooms that felt too empty, and moments that felt too long. But what makes The Changeling endure isn't just its patience, it's the persistent feeling that something real made its way onto the set and into the final cut. Inspired by a screenwriter's alleged true haunting, filmed in fabricated spaces that began behaving like real ones, and surrounded by inexplicable moments that blurred the line between fiction and intrusion, The Changeling is not just a story, it's a memory some are still trying to shake off. And those who worked on it, many never spoke of it again. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about. The Changeling secret's not buried, but waiting in silence to be heard. The house is quiet, but it never truly went still. Fact Hasson, he didn't imagine the story, he survived it. Long before The Changeling was filmed, its bones were already buried in someone's memory. Screenwriter Russell Hunter didn't invent the ghost story, he simply transcribed it from experience. In the late 1960 seconds, seeking quiet for his work, Hunter rented a grand but aging mansion near Cheeseman Park in Denver, Colorado. Within weeks, silence gave way to something far more intrusive. At first, it was subtle, rhythmic banging in the walls, doors that wouldn't stay closed. But then came the pools of water appearing on dry hardwood, the objects shifting when no one was near, the footsteps on the second floor while he sat alone on the first. It all came to a head when Hunter discovered a sealed attic room. Inside, a child's wheelchair, cloaked in dust, and a small locked trunk no one had mentioned in the property records. When he forced it open, he found aged papers, including a journal, a name, and a date of death that conflicted with every public record tied to the house. He left the property not long after, never returned, refused to speak of it unless pressed. Some say he exaggerated the tale for Hollywood, but others point out the city razed the mansion without ceremony. Years later, no explanation offered, no preservation battle fought. Haunting stories often begin with invention. This one started with an exit. Fact #2. A haunted house that never existed but still breathed. The grand Victorian mansion seen throughout The Changeling is unforgettable. Cavernous hallways, towering staircases, and a presence that presses on every frame. But in reality, the house never existed. Not one brick. Every corner, every banister, every echo was the product of controlled illusion. Exterior shots were matte paintings layered with practical effects. Interiors were constructed on a Vancouver soundstage with surgical precision. Production designers didn't aim for realism, they aimed for unease. The ceilings were raised unnaturally high, disorienting the actors and creating a visual vacuum above their heads. The doors creaked too long. The wheelchair central to several disturbing moments was built with a barely perceptible tilt, making it drift, even when still. But somewhere between blueprint and build, something changed. Crew members began experiencing electrical malfunctions, misplaced tools, and sudden cold zones where no air conditioning existed. One lighting technician reported hearing muffled crying from a corner of the set on a day no actors were present. He never returned. Could it be that, in designing a place to hold a ghost, they accidentally constructed a doorway instead? Fact #3. The prop that betrayed the script. In one of the film's most unsettling sequences, a red ball bounces down the stairs, seemingly thrown by no one. It's a chilling moment, made even more disturbing by what happened behind the scenes. The original plan was simple. The character discards the ball, symbolic of letting go. The story moves on. But the props department accidentally used the same marked ball for both shots, the before and after. What occurred next wasn't planned. The ball returned, rolled down the stairs untriggered. No one had cued the shot. No mechanism had been activated. The cameras caught it in real time. George C. Scott's reaction, confused, tense, unnerved, wasn't performance. It was instinct. Some suggest it was an overlooked rigging mistake. Others believe the moment was gifted an intrusion of real unease into a fabricated story. The production team didn't argue. They kept the footage. Because in that take, for a fleeting moment, the line between acting and reacting disappeared. And the question lingers, did the ball return because someone made a mistake or because something wasn't done with it yet? Fact #4. The music that refused to stay silent. When composer Rick Wilkins was first approached to create the score for The Changeling, his initial reaction wasn't excitement. it was hesitation. The story didn't inspire him, it unsettled him. Wilkins described the script as too quiet in the wrong places and the imagery as resisting music. He wasn't alone. Musicians brought in to perform early demos reported anxiety, cold sweats, and an inexplicable sense of dread while recording. One violinist refused to return after her bow snapped mid-stroke during a take not from pressure, but from what she claimed felt like resistance in the air. Eventually, Wilkins agreed to compose under one condition: he would never work alone in the studio. The final score, minimalist and sorrowful, was built on half-finished melodies and off-key harmonics that never fully resolve. Some moments drift just slightly out of tune, as if the music is grieving in real time. Even more bizarre, some chords on the final track weren't part of any written composition. No musician recalled playing them. No audio tech could isolate them. Were they ghost notes, analog flaws, or did the house leave behind a few bars of its own requiem? Fact #5. George C. Scott wasn't in character, he was in conflict. By the time they filmed the seance scene, George C. Scott was exhausted, not just from the shoot, from the energy in the space. The scene called for a slow-building dread, but Scott, typically measured and precise, suddenly slammed the table mid-take, his voice rising, his face locked in a fury that hadn't been scripted. The camera didn't stop rolling, the crew didn't speak, the director didn't call cut. That version made it into the final film. Later that evening, long after everyone had left, a loud crack was heard from the set. The seance table untouched since the shoot had split cleanly down the middle. There were no temperature shifts, no weight on the wood, just a silent break, as if something had had enough. Scott returned the next day, said nothing, and filmed the next scene. Some actors draw from emotion, others channel something deeper. The question here is, did the house pull something out of him or simply react to what it saw? Fact #6. The reflection that edited itself out. During post-production, an assistant editor spotted something strange in a transitional hallway, shot a mirror that briefly catches a human figure in its reflection. Pale, still, unspeaking. The problem? No one was standing there when they filmed. That corner of the set had been empty. The team agreed to cut the shot. But when they went back to retrieve the original footage, it had changed. Not altered, not glitched, changed. The mirror wasn't there anymore. The wall, which had clearly reflected light and space before now, appeared solid and blank. The timestamp matched, the frame rate matched, but the reflection had vanished completely. They checked backups. Nothing. They searched for alternate angles. None existed. The assistant editor, visibly shaken, eventually admitted something else. The face she'd seen in the reflection looked eerily similar to her late brother, only older. "He would have been that age now," she said, "but I never saw him grow up." No one asked to revisit the shot again. Some scenes are edited for clarity. Others are edited by something that doesn't want to be seen. Fact #7. The director who felt like a guest on his own set, Peter Medak, known for his meticulous direction and emotional depth, was proud of his work on The Changeling. But behind closed doors, he admitted to something deeply unsettling, the feeling that he wasn't alone in his decisions. While filming scenes involving the child's ghost, Medak would retreat to his trailer, sit in silence, and avoid playback. He later confessed to feeling as if some of the camera placements, shot sequences, and even line readings had been guided by a voice or impulse that wasn't entirely his own. It wasn't creative flow, it was something stranger, a presence, he claimed, that co-authored the tone of the film. And he wasn't the only one. Multiple crew members reported that certain shots came together in ways that didn't match the call sheet or the original shot list, but worked too perfectly to be mistakes. During post-production, Medak would sometimes stare at completed sequences and say, "I don't remember filming that like this." He left many interviews about the film, vague, deflecting questions about specific creative choices. Most directors impose their vision onto a story. Medak, it seems, spent much of the production wondering whose story was being told and whether he was merely the vessel for it. Fact #8. The reel that returned with scars. One of the film's most critical reels, containing footage from both the attic scene and the seance, vanished during transfer between editing rooms. Panic spread quickly. Reshooting was out of the question. That reel held moments that couldn't be replicated. Then, 2 days later, it showed up, sitting neatly on the editor's desk. No sign-in, no note, no fingerprints, just there. But when the reel was reviewed, something was wrong. While the scenes played normally, fine diagonal scratches had appeared across several frames, specifically in the moments when the ghost was most present. The damage didn't match common degradation patterns. It looked intentional, delicate, as if something had touched the film. Technicians blamed it on poor storage, but the reel had been inside a temperature-controlled canister, protected, locked. One editor, trying to lighten the mood, joked, "Maybe the ghost wanted a signature." No one laughed, and the scratches stayed in subtle, but permanent. Some physical marks are born from decay. Others are left behind as a reminder. Fact #9. The conductor who was never there. In a brief but memorable concert hall scene, an orchestra plays as Scott's character scans the audience. It's background until you watch the conductor. He doesn't blink, not once. His face remains frozen, focused, almost too still. Curious, the editors tried to schedule a pickup shot, but when they checked the casting list, the conductor wasn't there. No name, no release form, no contact info. His wardrobe had no tag. His presence undocumented. They combed through call sheets, extras, rosters, crew photos, nothing. To this day, no one knows who he was or how he ended up on camera. What's more disturbing, some viewers report feeling unnerved when watching him. A few have paused the scene only to see the conductor's eyes slightly shift, frame to frame. Others see no change at all. A visual glitch? A trick of the mind? Or a cameo by someone who wasn't playing a role, but watching for real? Not every ghost wears white. Some wear tuxedos and keep perfect time. Fact #0. The wheelchair that moved against the laws of physics. For one of the film's eeriest moments, a vintage wheelchair was rigged to roll slowly down a hallway, a straightforward practical effect. The floor had a slight incline. The timing had been rehearsed, but when the cameras began to roll, something happened that no one had prepared for. Instead of moving forward, the chair rolled backward, uphill, with no force applied, no crew nearby, no wind, just a slow, deliberate reversal that defied both the rigging and gravity itself. The crew froze, then scrambled to check the mechanism. Everything was functioning normally. No cables were active. The track was clear. They replayed the footage and noticed something even more peculiar. The wheels didn't spin as they should. They stuttered, pausing every few inches, as if pushing through resistance or being pulled in hesitation. The scene was reshot the following day with complete control and careful supervision. But that original take, it was never deleted. It was never used. But it was never forgotten either. It sits in an archival vault, unused, unexplained, like a whisper caught on film. Sometimes, an object doesn't move because of what's behind it, but because of what's inside it. Fact #9. The cry that had no origin, no source, and no record. Throughout the film, viewers hear a child's cry faint, layered into the silence of certain scenes, echoing down staircases or seeping through closed doors. It sounds like a design choice, a standard horror effect, but according to the sound team, it doesn't exist. No such audio file was ever created. No child was recorded. The sessions show no vocal takes. The master track has no layer labeled crying. When engineers isolated the individual channels, the sound was absent, but when all tracks were played together, dialogue, foley, ambient, the cry was there. Always in the same spot, always the same length, always the same tone. Some believed it was a hidden test tone buried in one of the ambient files. Others suspected an audio artifact from reused tape, but neither theory explained why the cry shifted pitch subtly depending on who heard it. One assistant engineer claimed to have enhanced the sound and heard a name within it, not just any name, his own. He quit the next day. Maybe it's a mistake. Or maybe it's a reminder that in The Changeling, not all voices came from actors, and not all were ready to be heard. Fact #2. The page that vanished into blankness, but left a message beneath. Director Peter Medak often worked late into the night, jotting notes and rewrites on a vintage typewriter he kept in his production office. One morning, his assistant found a page in the machine, single-spaced, line after line of gibberish. No one claimed to have written it, and Peter didn't remember doing so. At first, they thought it was nonsense, a ribbon misfire, a board prank. But the layout was too clean, the keystrokes too intentional. They handed it to a friend familiar with cryptography, who noticed rhythmic clusters resembling 19th century ciphers often used in Victorian mourning rituals. Hours later, without anyone touching it, the ink began to fade, not smudge, vanish. By dusk, the paper was blank, smooth, as if it had never held a letter. Medak burned the original, but his assistant had made a photocopy earlier, just in case. Years later, it was examined under infrared light. One phrase had left an invisible impression pressed into the fibers of the page. Tell them the boy was taken, not dead. It wasn't a script. It wasn't a message to the crew. It was something else, entirely. A statement that no one had asked, but someone, somewhere, needed to leave behind. Fact #3. The reflection that refused to exist. There's a brief scene in The Changeling that seems ordinary on the surface. George C. Scott's character walks into a dimly lit bathroom, pauses, looks toward the mirror, then walks out. No jump scare, no music sting, just silent. But when fans began watching closely, they noticed something off. In that entire shot, Scott's reflection is missing. The lighting is perfect, the angle is clean, the mirror is visible, and yet, no image appears. Initially dismissed as a trick of the angle, editors revisited the footage. Still no reflection. Lighting technicians swore the setup was correct. The set had other mirrored scenes that worked flawlessly, just not this one. What made things stranger was the discovery that early VHS releases of the film showed a different take, one where the reflection did appear. Somewhere between releases, the footage had changed, not glitched, not damaged. Changed, but no one remembered re-editing the scene. No alternate version had been archived. The original reel had supposedly never been touched. A fan theory emerged. The mirror scene was altered not by the editors, but by the house itself. That Scott's character had become so entwined with the entity in the story that the mirror no longer saw him as living. Ghosts don't always appear in reflections, but sometimes the living disappear from them first. Fact Hasson 4. The number that wasn't meant to be remembered. In the final cut of The Changeling, the haunted mansion bears a clear number etched on its facade, 187. The number appears only briefly carved into stone, easily overlooked, but for sharp-eyed viewers, it raised a troubling question, because throughout early drafts of the script, production notes, and even a few behind-the-scenes interviews, the house is consistently referred to as 113. The address was printed on props, call sheets, even lighting markers. So what happened? No one recalls changing the number. The final stone prop bearing 187 was never documented in the construction logs, and the page in the original script where the house address appears, torn out, not cut ripped jaggedly, as if removed in haste. In police code, 187 refers to homicide. In numerology, it suggests spiritual displacement, a soul without rest. Some believe the change was a subtle creative flourish. Others suggest it was a correction, that 113 was a mistake, and the house never wanted to be labeled with anything less than what it truly represented: death. There's a theory that the house didn't just claim lives, it erased identities, including its own. And if a house can change its number, what else did it decide to rewrite? Fact Hasson 5. The message that hid in silence. On the study set of The Changeling, props were carefully curated old books, letters, and papers, designed to blend into the background. But one envelope, placed in a drawer and marked simply with 4JC, wasn't on any list. No one remembered placing it. No one had scripted its existence. After production wrapped, a crew member pocketed it as a keepsake. For years, he never opened it. But one night, after rewatching the film alone, he did. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper, completely blank. No ink, no watermark, just stillness. But under ultraviolet light, faint impressions emerged, not written, but pressed into the page. The letters were jagged, uneven, as though someone had carved the words into the page without breaking it. One word became clear: remember. When he attempted to submit the envelope to a horror memorabilia museum, the curator declined. "We don't archive things that change themselves," she said. Today, the envelope remains sealed in a glass case in his home. Every few months, he swears the word looks different. Sometimes it reads, "Remember." Sometimes, "Return." Fact Hashanix. The window that waited for the same hour. Every time. There was a second-floor window on the main set, just another background element, not scripted to move, not highlighted in any scene. But it became the subject of quiet dread among the crew, because no matter how securely it was, latched, locked, or even nailed shut, they kept finding it open the next morning. Always open, and always around the same time, 3:13 a.m. At first, they assumed it was a structural flaw. The hinges, perhaps, or a shift in air pressure. So they installed sensors, reinforced the frame, triple-checked the mechanisms. Still, it opened, gently, slowly, never forcefully, just as if it had somewhere to be. When they reviewed security footage, the latch unhooked itself, not jerked or snapped, slid open with the quiet precision of an unseen hand. Then the window eased outward. The final attempt to keep it closed involved bolting the frame and hammering thick nails from the inside. And yet, on the last day of filming, it stood wide open again. The bolts were untouched. The nails bent outward as if something from inside had kneaded out, or something outside was being let in. Windows are meant to offer a view. This one offered a warning, and no one ever filmed there again. Fact Hasson 7. The scene that everyone remembered but no one could find. Ask longtime fans of The Changeling about their favorite scene, and a surprising number will describe the same moment. The protagonist finds a music box in the attic that plays a melody eerily similar to a song from his past. The camera lingers, the emotion lands, the air shifts. There's just one problem. That scene doesn't exist. It wasn't in the theatrical cut. It's not on any extended edition. It doesn't appear in the shooting script. Editors, producers, even the director deny ever filming it. Yet audiences insist they saw it. Some say it was shown in early test screenings. Others recall it from old VHS copies, but no home release has included it. Not officially, not ever. A few diehard fans claim to own bootleg tapes where the scene appears, but when those tapes are played, there's only static in its place. One collector even claims the entire tape rewound itself when the timestamp reached that moment. Was it a collective false memory? A forgotten deleted scene? Or a fragment of something that the house allowed people to witness once and then took back? There are scenes we miss because they're cut, and there are scenes we miss because we were never meant to remember them. Fact Hasonate, the bell that no track could hold. In several scenes throughout The Changeling, a faint bell can be heard soft, rhythmic, like a signal from another room. It's never highlighted, there's no character reacting to it. But if you listen closely, it's there, consistent, patient. But according to the film's sound department, that bell was never added. There's no file for it, no isolated stem. When each sound layer is played separately, ambient, Foley, dialogue, there's no bell. But play them all together, and it reappears. Always at the same pitch, always at the exact moment before something is revealed. One sound editor, disturbed by the pattern, began mapping the bell's occurrences. What he found chilled him. Every instance lined up precisely with a recorded death in the story's backstory, even ones that weren't shown on screen but were in the script. He left the project abruptly, left his notes in the editing room with a scribbled message. This isn't part of the film's soundscape, it's part of the house. And the bell? It still rings only when no one's listening. Fact Hassaninen, the dork knob that burned with cold. There's a simple, easily overlooked scene in The Changeling. A character reaches for a brass doorknob, pauses, hesitates, then turns it slowly. The tension is subtle, the pacing quiet. But what the audience doesn't see is what happened every time they tried to shoot it. That doorknob was unnaturally cold. Not metal in winter cold, but freezing, even under hot studio lights. Crew members who handled it reported numb fingers, red skin, even blistering. One assistant set decorator developed marks on his palm consistent with early frostbite. And this wasn't one-off. It happened every time the scene was attempted. Thermal cameras were brought in. What they captured shocked everyone. The knob's temperature plummeted by nearly 30 degrees in seconds without any drop in room temperature. Then, just as quickly, it returned to normal, as though nothing had changed. They replaced the knob, switched materials, tried insulating it, but the chill returned, always when someone reached for it, never before. Eventually, they reshot the scene using a different angle, and the original prop was stored away. Years later, someone attempted to retrieve that knob for a horror exhibit, but when they opened the box, it was empty, except for a patch of condensation. Cold doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes, it rises from whatever memory an object is trying to hold on to. Fact #20. The ending that wasn't written, just remembered. As production neared completion, George C. Scott approached the director with an unusual proposal. He wanted to change the ending, not because he disliked it, but because he had dreamed a different one so vivid, so specific, that he was convinced it was the correct version. In his dream, the house collapses in flames. The wheelchair is reduced to ash, and from the distance, a small child watches, not vengeful, not lost, just free. Scott described the visuals in precise detail down to the framing, the lighting, and the pacing of the final shot. None of it was in the script. Peter Medak listened. Then, in a move that surprised even the producers, agreed to reshoot the ending. The result is the haunting, ambiguous final sequence we now associate with The Changeling, a finale that feels both complete and unfinished. A scene that lingers, without fully closing the door. Years later, when asked about the rewrite, Scott revealed something more chilling. "It wasn't a dream," he said. "It was a memory. I just didn't know it was mine until I saw the house. Maybe some stories write themselves, or maybe they're simply remembered out of sequence, out of time." Bonus fact: the basement that no blueprint dared to mention. During location scouting, the crew entered an abandoned home, a last-minute substitute, meant only for exterior reference. Inside, the air felt thick. Still, the house had no working power, no water, no reason to feel awake. They explored cautiously. On the lower level, they found a locked iron door not marked on any blueprint. It had no handle, just a thick latch and heavy bolts. The space beyond wasn't on any layout. No one could explain why it was there. Medak, struck by instinct, ordered a short insert scene to be filmed there, just ambiance. A hallway shot, nothing more. When the footage was reviewed days later, the camera captured something no one noticed at the time. A pale, expressionless face, watching from the far corner, partially hidden behind corroded pipes, just out of focus, motionless. No one on the crew remembered seeing anyone in the basement during filming. The area had been cleared, locked, lit by a single portable lamp. The house has since been demolished. The footage still exists. Some claim the face blinks if you pause at the right frame. Others say it moves closer each time the reel is played. Maybe that basement was just a dead-end hallway. Or maybe it wasn't part of the house at all. Maybe it was the house's mouth. So, after peeling back the wallpaper of The Changeling, what do you believe remains underneath? Was this film merely an eerie masterpiece of sound and shadows, or was something else moving beneath the floorboards of its production? Something not quite cinematic, something remembered. Did the film's realism stem from skillful direction and atmosphere, or from actual memories, impressions, or forces that clung to the crew long after the cameras stopped rolling? And more importantly, what haunted detail stood out most to you? Was it the phantom doorknob that chilled flesh to the bone? The unmarked room captured on film? Or George C. Scott's dream of an ending that may not have been a dream at all? We want to hear your theory. Do you think this film channeled something real? Was there a scene that unnerved you more now, knowing the hidden truth behind it? Leave us your thoughts in the comments. And if you're brave enough, tell us which scene you'll never watch the same way again. And remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that were never meant to be fiction.